The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf.
Hey, hello, everyone. Inauguration Day if you're in the U.S., so a new chapter in our beginning. Welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. I'm Ira Wolf, as I said, and my co-host.
And I'm Joyce Joya.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Joyce. We've got an exciting show. You talk about a good time to be talking about adaptability, beginning a new chapter. Hopefully, it's all for the positive, and hopefully we're going to be able to share many ideas about that. And so lots going on. What else? What's new in your world?
Wow, so much has happened. I got vaccinated on Saturday.
Oh, congratulations.
And
the first one, right?
The first one, yeah, sure. And it was the Moderna. And 4 weeks from now, I can get another one. And then I can hug my grandchildren. And that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, excellent. A lot of people are. I was just sharing before we got on. I just registered my mother, who's in Florida. Hopefully, she'll get an appointment shortly, and we're registered, but we're still waiting. So, in Pennsylvania, but it's a good turn.
Well, in Texas, you had to get very lucky with timing.
Yeah, that's
very lucky with timing.
Yeah, well, it's all a little bit of luck this time, but hopefully it will be straightened out going forward. As I said, we're starting a new chapter. For us, every day is a new chapter anymore. It doesn't matter what country you're in, what industry you're in, what job you're in, what role you're in. Every day is definitely a new day. And as I've talked about, we talk about new normal or normal 2.0, talk about the next wave of normal. So today we've got Nancy Watt, who will be bringing on in just a few minutes. We'll chat a little bit yet, but we'll bring Nancy on. Met Nancy through the AQAI network. Mm-hmm. We both were certified in the Adaptability quotient, or the AQAI, in the same cohort. We bonded right away. We connected, and she's got a very interesting approach. And what I loved about that, and that's why she's on the show, she talked about how she used that using improv.
Improv, right?
Yeah, using improv. With a group of clergy. She actually used it with a group of nuns, and they have a community event. I believe this is correct. You'll correct me if not. Community event once a year, or how often they do it. And they bring together, they've had, the Catholics, the Jews, the Muslim, all varieties, different types of clergy. How do they use that to engage a different conversation? How do they get more comfortable with change? One of the things that I talked about was it's not the assessment doesn't solve anything. It just gives us a baseline. Talking about it doesn't do anything unless we apply it. But ultimately, what people are struggling with is to have the courage to take that first step. Because people are afraid are fearful of the unknown, the fear of the unknown.
Yes, so and improv can help that.
Right.
Sure.
So how can we help people gain the courage, which if you have the courage, you'll be more confident. And if you're more confident, then you're more hopeful. So,
I just want to share something quickly with you. I have a very good friend named Aldana Ambler, and one of the books that she suggested that I write was a book called Grounded Courage. And Grounded Courage is having the competence and confidence that gives you the courage to basically climb any mountain, to approach any problem. To know that whatever it is, you can handle it.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about. And whether it's the courage to have confidence or confidence to have courage, irrelevant. It's the matter of doing that. And most and also importantly, to be hopeful. I mean, there's a lot of pessimism, there's a lot of skepticism, there's a lot of dystopia going on, dystopic futures, but there's so many opportunities, and you and I see the opportunity. I know Nancy sees the opportunity, but a lot of our guests don't, or a lot of our listeners don't.
Well, long ago, I realized that if I wasn't optimistic, there was no future in being a futurist.
That's true. That's true. Although some have a pretty dystopic future. That's, what their view is. Before we jump into Nancy's, because I do want to be able to give her as much time as we possibly can, because it's going to be a really fun conversation, sure. Especially talking about improv, especially Second City background. What's that have to do with his future? Everything. There's a couple things. I want to invite everybody again to join Googlization Nation. It's free. It's our community. Hopefully we're going to be able to build it. Certainly you'll get updates and notices about the podcast, but other events that are coming up, actually looking at having an adaptability summit with a few people lined up for maybe the beginning of March. So stay tuned for that. You'll be some of the first to know. I also forget to do this every week. My book, Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. It was selected as one of the top 50 books to read by Thinkers 360. It's still in the top 50 on the best HR recruiting books of all time. And you can get it for free by going to besthrbook.com, besthrbook.com, real simple. And the only thing you pay is shipping, and you'll get a signed copy of the book. So if you do that, really appreciate it. And Joyce, I know your book is coming out.
My book's coming out, but we can't promote my book until I have a place for people to go and pre-order it, which will happen.
And it's experience rules.
Experience rules, how positive experiences will drive profit into the future.
And I know you and I are, and very similar, but you and I are working on a project with Employer of Choice.
Yes, we are.
To kind of revitalize that. And very excited about that, because this is definitely a year to do that. So no time like the present to bring on Nancy. As I said, I met Nancy 3, 4, 5 months ago. Time flies. I don't know.
Right. I'm really looking forward to having Nancy on, because I love improv. My husband and I took an improv course just for fun, for something to do together. And we had a blast. Yeah. We hated when it had to end. And improv is not only valuable in terms of how it can change your perspective, but it's also a great kind of team building thing if you're looking for something to do with a team, or even with a husband.
Even with the husband. So perfect. Nancy,
I love that. Or even with a husband. How great are you?
Thank you.
And even the Canadians are excited about the inauguration today, right?
We are.
We hail from Toronto, right?
Happy Inauguration Day to you both, and to all my American friends.
Yeah.
Thank you. We are very excited.
Yes.
Very happy.
Good. I'm glad.
So Nancy, we made the introduction about improv. Hopefully I didn't screw up your story a whole lot about the nuns.
The Holy Humor. Yeah. What a fantastic group. I love that you recalled that, Ira. I remember one of our very first conversations about that. Happens 4 times a year, and our city's religious leaders, we get the rabbis and imams and the native elders and the priests, and they come together to connect and laugh and communicate in a different way with experiential learning from all of the tools and techniques of improv. And it's so great. It is so great. I had one of the wonderful things about it is that not just to appreciate the differing perspectives and points of views, but to find the commonalities. Because let me tell you, almost all the time in these workshops, they end up talking shop, and they all have the same issues. They're all leading human beings, and there's always the same type of, domestic strife or challenges or things like that. And they're really just building community. And And that is what we do. And when we build an ensemble, that is what we do. So it's so much fun. And I'm so glad you referenced it. It's one of my favorite projects.
And once a conversation, and I think this goes for anything, once a conversation starts, a genuine conversation, we always realize we have more similar things in our lives than we have differences.
Isn't that the truth?
On the differences, right?
That's right. And then this cascade starts of common interests and bonding and the yes and the me too.
Right. It's so much more important for us to see the similarities than it is for us to see the differences.
Indeed.
And so often in the last, especially 4 years, we in the United States have been focused on the differences.
Indeed.
And I am looking forward to 4 years of focusing on the similarities.
and yet it's interesting. I study humor and comedy and social science for a living. About 4 years ago, someone called me a Pracademic, and it seems to have stuck because like the wonderful thing that you said in your opening, something like talking about it doesn't change anything. We need the courage to act, the research and the evidence-based data and the academia that I study and appreciate is largely synthetic knowledge. Nothing changes anything until we actually practically apply it. So that's the beauty of applied improv. That's what I do and largely why I do it, to give people the experience of that. I love, Joyce, how you also refer experience rules.
It's so true, right, Nancy? But
Yeah.
I want to start at the beginning. I
Sure.
want you to define improv for us, please.
Wonderful. Improv is, although we know it as an art form, improv is not a thing. It is not a tangible thing. Improv is a way. It is a way of listening. It is a way of interacting and co-creation and connection. The fundamental rule of improv is something called yes and. Yes and, whereby, as you and your husband know, Joyce, when you are on stage together and the offer of where we are, the environment, if you and your husband are on stage and he creates the reality that, say, he is on a sailboat, you accept that reality. That is the yes. The and is where you contribute and advance the scene and you say, yes, and here comes the north wind. We were warned about that, and away you go in a scene. The important thing that I always like to stress when I talk about yes and is not that we agree with we agree that the reality has been set, in this case, a sailboat, but not necessarily that we like it. It is simply acceptance, not necessarily always this yes and agreement. It just means that we accept the reality that has been created. And I think that point is important to bring home, because I tell you, the number one reason that miscommunication happens is that we don't accept the reality of the other. And may I say, largely why we live in such a politically polarized world, that the conversation doesn't go anywhere. It stops when we simply don't accept the reality of the other. It is only when we do that, then we can continue to build that forward, and in the experience that Ira and I have, to appreciate what it means to have adaptability, what that looks like in our ability and our character and our environment.
What you're reminding me of, Nancy, is something that H.L. Mencken used to do. He had a lot of detractors. He was not a great guy in some ways. He was a misogynist and had some kind of way out views. We would consider him not a politically correct person for our time.
Right.
And his response to all of the people who criticized him was to send them a postcard which says, "You may be right, HLM." And the reason that came to mind is that in doing that, he was doing exactly what you're saying.
Yep.
He was accepting that it's okay for them to be where they are. He's not saying that he's embracing that point of view, but it's okay for them to be there. I've used
So
that.
great.
I've used that
Absolutely.
more than once.
Yep. One of my very first business mentors years ago, a wonderful executive, and a great line that she gave me was to say, let me think about that. Instead of always having the need to have an answer, the need to be on, allowing for the space between us to exist, and my commitment to think about what you have just said, and I do, allows for more of a deepening of that connection, and it enriches the experience. We often say in improv that listening is a sacrificial act. That improv does not happen unless we are mindfully, actively listening. And from your experience, I mean, when you're on stage and you're in the moment and you're building something, you are deeply in that moment. It is indeed a very mindful, playful experience. And listening should be that too, and that we can appreciate that doesn't often happen. So often people listen waiting for their turn to respond rather than being affected. Imagine having changed as a result of hearing something you just heard.
Right. So one of the things that I think you've said at some point is that silence can create connection.
Oh,
can you explain that a little bit for us?
So in my workshops, I will tell you that silence shows up as another character. Silence allows for that in terms of whether perhaps we are in the negotiating table, or we are in a heated discussion, or even on an improv stage. Silence builds contemplation, and it allows for this space of others to experience a connection that is informed by that silence. And I know that totally sounds artsy. So let me, I sound like I'm in an improv workshop, but very often it's in its simplest form. What silence does is give us that space, that opportunity to respond versus react. I tell you, the difference is huge. Allowing silence to be a part of our conversation gives us that space and that mindfulness and that ability to form a response, to be affected by what we have just heard, to listen as that sacrificial act, and respond with kindness and intelligence and thoughtfulness. Reaction is much more common. And so embracing the silence, and that is straight out of an actor's playbook, right out of Second City, allowing silence to be a part of the conversation is really, really effective.
It works for professional speakers too, I can tell you.
Absolutely.
And I know while you were talking about silence and speaking and hearing and listening, both of you, I think, are familiar with the DISC assessment. And oftentimes we use that as a tool to help start that conversation, to understand one another. And the high I, for those who aren't familiar with it, I know many are, the high I is energized by influencing other people, and a low I is de-energized by that. So typically the I's will be doing the talking, and the low I's will not. What's significant about that is when I see somebody that has 100% I on the scale, is that they need to become better listeners. But becoming a better listener does not mean just stop talking and waiting for that opportunity to jump in. So you're sitting there counting the seconds, counting the minutes. Now I can, okay, I've had enough. Now I can do it. So it really is, it took a while to understand that active listening is a skill. Listening is just not talking. It's just not somebody else coming and you hear the words, but you're not absorbing them. I also love what you said, Nancy, and going back to what you and I have been talking about, that continuum of adaptability. Starting with flex, again, people throw in a lot of buzzwords. Mm-hmm. And last year, the buzzword of the year was resilience. Everybody needs to become more resilient. And the year before that was, or a few years before that, it was grit.
Right.
These are all things we measure with the AQAI. So we have grit, resilience, and growth mindset, mental flexibility, and learning. But people can conflate is the word I was looking for. Conflate
Yes.
flexibility, agility, resilience, grit, adaptability, all one and the same. And what I was trying to do is differentiate it to make sense. What you just said something about the difference between reacting and responding, which is really embracing it. So on this continuum, the research is saying is that flexibility and agility are reactions to a situation. So flexibility is the ability to react to a catalyst, to a change,
Right.
sort of like changing, going down the river, flowing down the river.
Correct.
Similar to agility, some talk about flexibility being an individual trait and agility as being more of an organizational or a team trait. But whichever everybody agrees that it's a reaction to an event. Where when we talk about resilience, it's the ability to bounce back after that event, but you haven't grown further. You haven't really grown at all. And endurance is just being able to plow through that. It's having that tanker, that Hummer, that machine, the Terminator, crash through a brick wall and come out the other side unscathed, but no different. They just survived. Right. But when we're talking about adaptability, it is the ability to grow stronger, to become better. It's all of those. It's to be able to endure, to bounce back, to be able to be flexible and agile. But when the words that you said, and we were talking about this earlier, is that as people are talking, I'm picking out, helping, because we're figuring this out on the fly. We're literally doing improv of how do we help people. Is the difference between just reacting to an event or embracing the event. And if you just want to continue to react, it's exhausting. To VUCA style change, to volatile, uncertain, complex, and an accelerating pace of change, it's exhausting to kind of constantly be zigging and zagging without a strategy, without the skills to do that. And what we're talking about and how improv can help you build that courage and confidence in order to be able to adapt and to zig and the zag with ease. It's part of our life. We're just constantly dancing with change. That was a line from my TED Talk. I grew up dancing with change. Is how do we do that? And so for somebody to other than signing up for a class on improv, what can an individual or what can an organization start right now? What's an exercise that they can do to say, I get it, this sounds good. Where do we get started? Right.
Indeed. There was so much of what you said that I appreciated. The tenacity of grit, the elasticity of resilience, to be able to bounce back and to have an agility within an organization, and the emotional fortitude and ability to have that difference between a response and a reaction. So we're in complicated, challenging, exciting times. I also want to give a shout out for at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about optimism. You talked about hope. And it intrigues me that the research shows that hopeful people are more realistic, which is somewhat a little bit counterintuitive. Hopeful people give that sort of Pollyanna, the sun will come out tomorrow type of thing. And yet a great researcher, Shane Lopez, does something called hope mapping. And there is more realism in people who are hopeful, and they are consequently able to see where the speed bumps are ahead, see where the problems are ahead, and be able to navigate those better. Hope is what can an organization do? I would encourage them to look into the work of positive psychology, because they are kissing cousins to applied improv. And indeed, the program that I run, it's called Happy spelt with an IE. It is an acronym for How to Apply Positive Psychology Improv Exercises. And so the work of Marty Seligman, the past president of the APA, the American Psychological Association, and his work in learned optimism, Barbara Fredrickson and Adam Grant and Jonathan Haidt and Angela Dweck, Angela Duckworth, Carol Dweck, all of these very interesting researchers who are looking at this emerging field of psychology are revealing that as opposed to traditional psychology, which took sort of a what is wrong approach, what is dysfunctional, what is abnormal, and that's all well and good, and as it should be. Of course, the history of that field should look at this. Positive psychology looks at what is working, what humans and organizations do to thrive, and often erroneously thought of as some sort of happyology. What the field of positive psychology looks at is how indeed people and organizations thrive, and more pointedly, how we can learn to suffer well. You talked about the necessity of discomfort and being able to, adapt to change. And all pedagogy, the science of how we learn, reveals that when we play and when we laugh and we are experiencing and especially co-creating with another, we learn better. We retain things for longer. Indeed, it's not just information in, it is part of us. It is that experience. So to extrapolate the field of positive psychology and to summarize it in the yes and approach is to offer just one little, I see we're at 126, offer one little exercise. So
do we have time? Do we have time, Ira, to ask her the question that I would love to hear? Which
we're in control. It's our show.
Tell us about the most challenging client situation you ever faced.
Wow. For different reasons. So a quick recipe for burnout in the world of HR, as you both know, is being in a position where you are on the front lines and hold the weight of the responsibility to complete the task at hand. Have in your forefront perfect execution, and at the same time have no decision-making power to change the system. So.
Very difficult.
So our teachers, our emergency room nurses, people who are on the front line, and it is, and in organizations, and I've worked with universities and hospitals and government organizations. For a lot of those employees, they need to be heard, and I speak to this example because it took a long time for me to get up the rungs of the ladder to talk to the right people, to do the necessary change in the organization so that those people could be heard. And once they were, then that moved the behavioral dial. There's a whole world in diversity and inclusion as well that I think adaptability quotient is going to be extremely valuable in. And I look forward to some important social experiments that I've collaborated, that I have begun to collaborate with, to be able to make significant change in that world as well.
I'm looking forward to learning more about it.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Joyce.
I said I'm looking forward to learning more about adaptability and the AQ.
Oh, good. It's
AQAI.
Fascinating. It's fascinating, if it be true.
Something pop up. So I got a question for you, Nancy. We're almost at the end of the segment. We've ended 2020, and everybody's glad to put it behind us. However, there are things that happen during the course of the year that we hope don't go away. We hope it continue, that we learned either about ourselves or about a situation. What's something that you hope that you can take away from 2020 that that can continues, something new that continues?
Oh, what a great question, Ira. See, this is why I hit it off with you. And I'm going to have to share something, a little personal. The fact that, courage never feels courageous. When I need to do something courageous, it's always an experience in vulnerability. And I do not like feeling vulnerable. I am much more comfortable speaking behind the world of academia, statistics, blah, 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 and being able to facilitate a workshop. But if I am to be true to my work, if I am to chase the good, I do two things. I chase what is good and what is true. And the truth is that after my company being decimated in the spring of 2020, losing 95% of my revenue. I was supposed to be in 4 different countries, had speaking engagements all over the world, and you could hear the brakes screeching to a halt. So I had to retreat, revamp, renew, reinvent, and feel the vulnerability through that. I came out not unscathed, but stronger. So if you ask me what I want to continue in 21, it is just that. I want to keep doing things not because they are, not in spite of the fact that they are uncomfortable, but because of the fact that they are uncomfortable. And I think that is the message that shows like this and, the professionals like yourselves, we need to continue that message for our students and our children and our grandchildren that Joyce will soon hug after she gets her second vaccine, and our organizations. I mean, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that is, the north winds are coming and we will experience more change. And there is a way to do so with that we can adapt with optimism. And I think that is, that's what we're being called to do.
Nancy, how can people reach out to you? We had your website going across the bottom before. We'll put it back up there.
Thank you.
How else can they get a hold of you? How can they reach you?
Yeah, the website is the best way. Shoot me an email. I am Nancy at nancywattcom.com. My name is Nancy Watt. My company is Nancy Watt Communications, and I am privileged to do the work that I do. I look forward to hearing from some of your listeners. If anyone has any questions about applied improv, I promise you I get back to you, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share with you today, Joyce and Ira.
I have just one last final question.
Sure.
Were you able to move your previously in-person improv training online?
Thank God. Yes. Oh my goodness. So I did so with a couple different things. I built an in-house home studio with the help of a startup company called lightboarddepot.com. This was a game changer. I needed to build myself a bit of a stage, and I love it. And so thank goodness so many improv exercises translate really well online. Thank you for that.
And the Lightboard is fascinating. I know we talked about maybe using it today, and it wasn't, the kind of right format, but it was. I saw it on another presentation you did.
Yeah.
UAI. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Lightboard Depot.
Another thing, probably prior to this, said, how can you possibly do improv digitally? How can you do it? And
there it is.
And we can.
Exactly. We have a paper published in the Journal of Psychology, Neuroscience, and Behavior, lowering social anxiety disorder for youth using a 12-week improv bootcamp. And
wow.
I am delighted that worked. I'm sorry that I didn't mention it earlier, but it's a great project. But we have continued with those youth online, and they named their ensemble connection deficit disorder, not attention deficit disorder, connection deficit disorder. And so if you or Ira, if you want to join us on 4 p.m. on a Friday. We have psychologists and actors and improvisers join us from all over the world. And what a beautiful thing to be able to do online. If any of your listeners have an interest in that, in youth education and social anxiety, I'd be delighted to continue that conversation as well.
Thank you. Glad we continued that conversation. Nancy, it's always a pleasure.
So generous.
And I know you and I will be chatting quite a bit. Down the road. Look forward to collaborating and building the AQ community and being part of helping 100 people, 1 million people not be left behind.
Absolutely. Your president said this morning, may we show the world not by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. Wow. A fine statement on this important day. Happy Inauguration Day to you both. Thank you for allowing me on your show.
Thanks so much, Nancy.
Thank you so much.
Really, really appreciate it. NancyWhatcom.com. Right? Joyce, yes. We could have gone on forever.
Yes.
My conversations with Nancy are always quick and robust and invigorating. So, and hopefully we left that feeling with a lot of people.
And always over before we're ready for them to be over, right?
That's a good thing. It leaves us wanting, and hopefully it leaves everybody else. Right. We do need to have a quick break. You come back to a shorter segment. We borrowed some of your time for Ahead of the Curve.
That's okay.
But you're listening to Geeks Geezers and Googlization. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. If you haven't subscribed to it, go to googlizationnation.com. Oh, forgot one of the most important things. We now have a Geeks Geezers Googlization LinkedIn page. So if you go to LinkedIn, just type in Geeks Geezers Googlization, and you'll also get updates on there as well. We're going to take a short break. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Success Performance Solution. And another real quick announcement, we have a new sponsor coming on board in a couple weeks in Gomo.
Very excited. Very excited about that.
More about that. But today you'll hear from Success Performance Solutions, and we'll be back with Ahead of the Curve. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
A lot of you might be feeling like you're standing in deep shift. But do you know what grows and rises out of deep shift? Opportunity. To successfully navigate the shift to the new normal, each of us must learn to rapidly adapt to the speed of change. Some of us are hardwired for this. Others, not so much. That's where Success Performance Solutions can help. Success Performance Solutions is now your AQ headquarters. Whether you are personally struggling with the next chapter in your career or wondering how ready your team is for fast, disruptive change, our AQ assessment and coaching will provide you a detailed, scientifically backed roadmap to guide you into the new normal. Optimize your adaptability today. Contact Success Performance Solutions about evaluating your team's change readiness or joining our upcoming AQ Masterclass. Visit successperformancesolutions.com or call us at 800-803-4303.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Geeks Geezers Googlization. We're here for our segment Ahead of the Curve with my co-host Joyce Joya, the origin of this is I've been a reader and a follower of the Herman Trend Alert for 20 years, I think, a long time. And then just a few months ago, Joyce and I had started to talk, wanted to feature part of that. She was talking a lot of trends about the normal, what was going to happen, normal 2.0. We started to do this as just a few minute segment, and we're still continuing the segment, but expanded that into a co-host role as well. So Joyce, what's on your mind?
And by the way, I'm thrilled about it. Thank you so much, Ira.
Pleasure.
So the topic that I wanted to discuss today is a trend alert that I wrote a couple of weeks ago called "Access is the New Currency." Mm-hmm. Let me explain. I was sitting in the office of the general manager of the hotel where I was staying in Mazatlan, Mexico. And we were talking about the fact that most of the hotels that are on the Camaro Sabalo, I believe is how you say it, the particular street that he's on, have this problem in that people who live in Mexico think about Mazatlan as a weekend-only destination. And I said, well, we just need to create some midweek events. And so he said, well, we need to get you in to talk to the Hotel Association. And I said, great. And let's keep talking about this. And I realized that there was a connection that I was seeing. You know, what I do as a futurist, I think, is to connect the dots. I see something going on here, something going on here, something going on there, and I put it together and say, okay, the world's going in this direction. Well, what I realized is for the people who would be coming, access to celebrities might be a real draw. It might be enough to get them to come to those hotels and to the city during the week, right? Mm-hmm. Spend that extra money for that access to celebrities. And that helped me. From there, I began thinking about a trend alert that I had written in the past that was about something that Jim Brickman was doing. Jim Brickman is a pianist whose work I really like. And Jim Brickman at one time was selling experiences, backstage experiences with him for $200 or $300. You could do a backstage tour and be there at a special reception with him and have extra access, right? You could also buy a spot on his radio show for $300. I mean, different things, different kinds of experiences that he was selling. But basically what they really were was access. And so that helped me to start thinking, well, if consumers value access, then I'll bet that all stakeholders would value access. And so I began thinking about how each of the different stakeholder groups would perceive access in a different way. For instance, when I was doing some work with the state of Colorado, this was years ago, and it was one of the agencies, and they wanted to reward their people for very good work, but we had no money. And so I got them together and I said, okay, so besides money, what would you value? And one of the answers came back as breakfast or lunch with the head of the agency or the number two. And connecting the dots, I realized it was access that they were finding to be valuable. They were placing a high value on that access. Think about sponsors or as we call them now, corporate partners in corporate events. Right. What are they looking for? They're looking for access to their economic buyers.
So going back to my question that I had for Nancy at the end of the first segment,
sure.
Which was what was something from 2020 that you wanted to keep from 2021? And as you're talking about access, what I got was access to people in 2020 that I probably would have never had before because they were speaking. They were busy. I might not have ever had that opportunity to meet with Nancy, because if Nancy wasn't she didn't have to reimagine her business. She wasn't on stage all the time. She wasn't doing trainings all the time. She may not have gotten involved with the AQAI. And if she wasn't involved with the AQAI, then she wouldn't have been in my certification cohort. And then that leads to something else. But I had the opportunity to reach so many people. I think that's what's relevant about what you're saying. And
Yes.
there may be people thinking, what's this have to do with me? I'd have to pay someone to have access to them. No, you don't. You have free access to people now, because people aren't commuting. They're not traveling. They're not on stage. They're not in meetings. They're in meetings all the time, but there's a little bit more flexibility.
It's different,
we now
right?
have access to people
Right.
that we normally didn't have access to.
They don't have to spend hours getting on airplanes or even getting in a car to commute from one place to another. And let me give you another great example following on exactly what you're talking about. And that is that the Institute of Management Consultants was able to get the Malcolm Gladwell as a keynote speaker for their conference, whom they never could have afforded pre-COVID. And he was amazing. He was phenomenal. And it was because they were able to get that access due to COVID. Anyway, so I'd really love, because we're moving toward the end of the show, to talk a little bit about what I'm going to be doing on Friday morning. Because on Friday morning, I'm going to be working with our new sponsor. Our new sponsor is Ngomu. And Ngomu is a learning platform. And on Friday morning, I'm going to be interviewed by them in the opening segment. It's called, to get there, it's bemoredays.com. And if you would please put that into the chat so that Rebel can put it up for our audience, that would be great. bemoredays.com. And that's where you can go and register. It's free. And I'm going to be talking about the future of health and wellness. The entire half-day event is about health and wellness and different aspects. It's a learning community. You'll get to hear the coaches and find out a little bit about what they do. It's a great opportunity to become acquainted with our new sponsor, Ngomu, and that's spelled INGOMU.
Yep. And I think we have it. I'm not sure if it's scrolling. Well, there's Be More Days.
Be More Days. That's the place to go to register. For Friday.
Okay. And then if you want to learn about Ngomu, then that also should be scrolling across as well. We've had a great January so far. We've had Jeff Wald to kick it off, talking about future of work. We've had Derek Lunston last week to talk certainly about health and well-being. And today, I mean, with Nancy. Tremendous about AQ, using improv, how to boost that, how to develop, build your courage, your confidence, and instill hope for a future, because we certainly need it. The world is not slowing down by any means. Next week, we're going to have Jason Cochran. Jason,
really looking forward to hearing Jason.
He's got a company, I Aspire, again, talking about how we humans can adapt, be more comfortable, how we can help other people do that. And we've got a great lineup. We just schedule a few more people even into March. So we'll have a great show. We really do appreciate everybody who listens on a regular basis. Please share. Don't forget, if this is your first time listener or you haven't done it yet, please subscribe on Apple, Audible, Google, Google Play, Stitcher, you name it. We're up there.
We're on them all, right?
We're on them. Or just subscribe on the YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Leave your comments. Let us know what you're thinking about, what you're doing. We want to grow the community, and we really do want to help everybody succeed to be able to grow forward. There is a tremendous amount of opportunity that is coming up. That we all share in, but again, people are a little bit tentative. They're waiting for things to settle down, and you're going to have a long wait.
For sure. I want to make one more suggestion, and that is that if there are any topics that you'd like us to cover on Ahead of the Curve, please don't hesitate to let us know.
And the same, if there's someone you want to hear from, if there's a topic you have to share for Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, please let us know. We're happy to entertain that as well. Reminder, go to besthrbook.com. You can get your Recruiting in the Age of Googlization copy. Second edition, get a signed copy. Just pay for the shipping, and you'll have that. Don't forget to go to googlizationnation.com and subscribe, or just go and follow Geeks, Geezers, Googlization, which is now on LinkedIn. Go to our page there. Thank you to Success Performance Solutions. Thank you to you, Joyce, for being part of the show.
Thank you to you, Ira.
We look forward to bringing in Gomo on to the show as this new sponsor beginning in February. And thank you, all the listeners. Appreciate you being here. Please spread the word. And until next week, when the shift hits your plan, we'll see you then. Take care.
Thank you.